All right, here we go. We'll get started. So, the book for this month is called The Gift of Failure. The author is Jessica Leahy, and she is a writer, now professional writer, but she worked for many years in middle schools as an English teacher. So, she has a unique perspective, obviously, and has seen with her own children and the children that she teaches a shift in over involvement of parents, which I think is definitely true. I feel this too. I'm sure many of you do as well in that when we were growing up, I'm 47 to age myself, but my parents really were not involved in my school functioning much, if at all. They left all of that between me and my teachers. There was no Blackboard or online system so that they could check in and know what our grades were at every given time. There was no email to communicate with teachers. So they really only saw the teachers at the annual parent teacher check in, maybe twice a year, or if the teacher called them because there was a problem. And now, which I think is better, we are generally more connected to our kids' classrooms and their teachers and what's going on in the classroom. But that leads us to then be over involved, and our kids do what kids do, which is they get distressed and overwhelmed. That's part of being a developing person. And then we do what we tend to do, what feels good to us, which is step in and rescue them. And what she's saying is that by doing that, we're really hindering their growth and their development. So I'll show my slides now and we'll get into it because some of the things that she suggests are, I think, very challenging, including for me to do. So, to okay. So, is everybody seeing the cover of the book, The Gift of Failure? Yep. Okay, awesome. Thank you for confirming. Yeah, so as I said, she's really challenging us to allow our kids to do what they need to do, be on their own, experience the disappointment, the setbacks, the lessons that they really do need to learn to foster more independence, competence, and resilience and their own intrinsic motivation. If you are new to the book club, please know that you can catch all the replays in the Facebook group. It's the Empowered Parents Club. It's open to the public, but you do need to request to join and have signed up to be on the book club list. There's also an app, although I don't know how much longer I'm going to support this. I don't think many people are using it, but it's in the Apple App Store. It's called the Parent Doctor app, and that has all the book clubs and the PDF replays as well. If you haven't yet listened, please search for my podcast if you like to listen to podcasts. I've been interviewing lots of different parents about the journey through parenthood. If you like it and rate it, that will help more people be able to check it out and to see it. And in my work as the parent doctor, I do this free monthly book club every month. But I also work more intimately with people, both in groups and in individual settings. If you're interested in working with me, you can go to booking.theparentdoctor.com/30 to book an appointment. I basically work based on these 4 pillars of empowered parenting that I've culled from all the reading and experience that I have as a child psychiatrist and as a mom. But the first is to define direction. So, as parents, to be mindful of the fact that our kids really need us to help them know what it means to be part of your family, to be a person associated with you, and to be the person that they are. So, to help them have words to display that. And I created a mission statement exercise that you can use to create your own mission statement that might be helpful if that's something that you feel like you haven't yet done. Then the second pillar is emotion regulation. And I'm not talking about kids' emotion regulation, although certainly we want to support our kids to develop their own emotional regulation skills. But in order to do that meaningfully, we really have to optimize our own emotion regulation skills, which is so much easier said than done, even for me, even though I know all the things. I still get irritable sometimes, yell at my kids sometimes. I'm human, but I'm working on it. And I know that if I continue to work on it, it is possible to get to a place where really nothing's going to make me blow up because I'll know that we're all okay. The third pillar, which is what we're really going to be talking about today, is embracing failure. And I do think this is the toughest one of all, although emotion regulation is up there too. And this is the idea that anytime you're learning something new, you don't learn the most when you try something and you instantly have success. That's luck. That's great. It feels good. But you actually learn the most when you try something and it doesn't work, and you come back and you try something else and it doesn't work, and you come back and you try something else and it works a little bit, but not perfectly. And you come back and you try again and again. So each time we fail, it's like we're ascending a stair on the staircase towards the progress that we desire. And this is really something that we want to help our kids understand too, and get them to really embrace failure. And that relates back to grit and mindset. We read last year the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. We're going to be reading probably next year Angela Duckworth's book Grit. But this idea that people who persevere through challenges, who embrace failure as a sign that they're doing the right thing to get to where they want to be, rather than a sign that they're not meant to do that thing or they don't have what it takes, those are the people who are most successful. Perseverance outranks IQ any day of the week for how successful people are. And so this is really something that we want to cultivate in our children from a young age. And then the final pillar is practicing gratitude. We need to lead our kids to know how to do this. We need to model it for them. People who regularly practice gratitude and incorporate that into their lives are more joyful people, they're healthier people, and they have lower rates of depression and other mental health problems. So the beginning of her book really talks about the evolution of parenting. And I have found this fascinating myself as the parent doctor, thinking about why is it that it really wasn't until the middle of the 20th century that parenting even became an idea, a term, a verb. People have been parents since the beginning of time, but she talks a little bit about the historical context, about the very high death rates of children before reaching adulthood until the advent of modern medicine and antibiotics and vaccines and all of those things that happened in the 20th century, and how certain thinkers thought that kids really should be seen and not heard, and that they were just meant to be endured children until they became adults. And that obviously has shifted a lot. Our understanding of psychological development has changed in the last 75 years tremendously. And so there's pluses and minuses to that. Overall, I think it's a good thing. But she does emphasize that in the past, kids were coddled less. They really were assumed to be people who could function. They were given more responsibilities. Part of that was by necessity, right? If you were some pioneering family farming your land, like you needed your kid basically as soon as they could walk to pitch in and give a helping hand and to contribute to the family's survival. But the modern shift, as we've endured so many wonderful changes in our lives that have made our lives easier, is that kids don't really need to do as much anymore. And so often now, especially in affluent families, parents view the kid's job as just to be a good student. That's all they expect of their child. They don't expect them to be washing their laundry, making their lunches, putting away their plates, cleaning the house. And certainly they don't expect them to be plowing the field. So along with that, there's been a general trend for us to become overly protective of our kids and prioritize their emotional well-being over their physical and functional independence. And with that, we want to avoid our kids suffering. And we'll talk a little bit more about why that is in a moment. I think it's harder now for us to endure our kids' discomfort than it was for our parents and than it was for their parents. But the concern, and this is a big concern that I have, it's why I started doing this work as the parent doctor, because I see this in the kids that I treat, especially in the last 10 years or so, is that there's increasing rates of depression and anxiety, especially among teenagers. And all of this over-involvement is the reason why. We've basically made them feel that they shouldn't have to be challenged in order to go through life. So inevitably, when they are challenged, because that is what life is, a challenge, they feel like they're doing something wrong, or they feel like the world is out to get them, or that people are taking advantage of them or persecuting them. And that's not really how it is. That's not really the truth. So the pitfalls of overprotection are, number one, enmeshment. That means basically an unhealthy blurring of the boundary between you as the parent and your child. And that really hinders their independence. So if they come home and they're complaining about something that happened at school and you get upset on their behalf and take it upon yourself to fix the problem, their pain becomes your pain. But along with that, their success becomes your success. And this leads them to have a lack of independent feeling, and it takes away their internal motivation. So extrinsic motivation is what we consciously think is what motivates us. Like we want to get into a good college so we can get a good job and earn a good living. We want to get a good grade so that we can be the teacher's pet and get a good recommendation. We think that all those external motivators are the things that actually reward us. But there's been a lot of research that, in fact, when you reward someone for doing something that they otherwise would have done just for the sake of doing it, just for the intrinsic reward of completing the task, they're less likely to want to do that again in the future. And this is true in animals and it's true in humans. It's part of how our brains are wired. So, motivation, true motivation, doesn't come from extrinsic rewards. It doesn't come from getting the good grade. It doesn't come from getting the trophy. It comes from knowing that you stuck with something that was hard and that you succeeded. And so that's something no one can give you. It's something that you can only experience by being permitted and encouraged to struggle with things that are difficult. And that's really the essence of this book and what it's all about. And then finally, the missed opportunities when we step in and rescue our kids, when we see that they're struggling or they're experiencing a challenge, we without words, like there's an unspoken message there that we think they're incompetent and that they're not able to do that thing. If we try to make it better, try to step in and fix it for them, we're sending the unspoken message that we don't believe that they can do it on their own or that it would be too much for them. And this is not the message you want to send to your kid, especially in early adolescence and young childhood too. So we want to really foster our kids' autonomy and their sense of competency. So how do we do that? We guide them, we don't control them. So we want to allow our kids to struggle and to solve problems independently. Sorry, guys, I'm using this. It's a great app. It's called the Gamma app, but it uses these AI images. And if you look, it's really funny. Like this dad is like emerging from the sofa. I don't know what the deal is there. I think the idea is he's letting his kid struggle to tie his shoes, although this kid looks very young to be tying their shoes. But the idea is that we do want to let our kids be able to struggle and tie their shoes. And the fact that there are so many Velcro shoes on the market just goes to show that this is hard for us. The shoe companies know that parents don't want their kids to struggle. So I put here WMRD. I have been telling myself recently, what would Mr. Rogers do? I really think that he's the embodiment of the non-anxious presence that we all should strive to be as parents. If your kids struggling to tie their shoes, would Mr. Rogers be like, get your shoes on, we gotta go. Put on your Velcro shoes, we gotta go. No, he would be like, good job, you've almost got it. Yep. Remember, the bunny ear goes over and under and through. Super, high five. He would be encouraging. He would be patient. He would recognize that losing his cool in that moment is probably only going to make it take longer than letting the child struggle to do the thing. Number two here, though, in this is important because it can seem like you're saying, let your child do anything. And that's not the case. You have to let your child struggle within strict, clear boundaries. You want to still be providing limits and structure. And those limits and structures serve to foster autonomy because you're expecting your child to do the things that you know they're capable of doing and not expecting them to have to do everything. When we're thinking about our kids learning new skills, I like to think of it in 4 steps. The first is you do it for them to show what can be done. The second is you do it for them while teaching them how you do it and explaining. The third is they do it with your support nearby to help or to check in or to help them learn how to optimize the process. And then finally is their independent completion of the task, whether that is tying their shoes, packing their own lunch, making sure they've got their homework in their backpack, whatever it is. And every single executive function skill that our kids learn, it goes through those 4 stages. And it is not a one-way street. It's not like you go 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, done. No, it's 1 to 2 to 1 to 2 to 3 to 2 to 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to you go back and forth. And it just takes a lot of time. And what we want to be doing is encouraging the effort, not the outcome along the way, because that is what we really want. We want to have kids who persist, who have grit, who keep at it, even though it's difficult. And you want to do that without the tempting. I know it's so tempting to step in and rescue them, but without rescuing them, because we want to send the message, I know you can do it if you just keep trying. Any thoughts or comments there or struggles that you have with doing that? Because I know it's hard. I'm guilty of buying my daughter Velcro shoes, even though she has been taught to tie her shoes. She's not getting daily practice. I'm guilty of that too. All right. Building life skills through responsibility. Along with this, she discusses the importance of family contributions. And we talked about this in other book summaries as well. Last year, we did Ron Lieber's book, The Opposite of Spoiled, in which he encourages us as parents to give our kids an allowance so they get some experience with money, but he discourages tying that to chores. And the reason for that is it's an external reward, an extrinsic reward for something that ultimately you want your kid to be doing because of the intrinsic experience of contributing to the family. It's just something we all have to do, right? To be a good friend, a good roommate, a good partner, a good mom, a good dad, a good sister, a good brother. You have to do things not just because someone's paying you to do it, but because you want to make the other people in your family happy. You want to make your life easier. You want to make the house more clean, whatever it is. So we want to replace chores, which makes it seem like it's a burden and expectation, with duties, opportunities, basically, to provide value to the home. And that really is great as a shift in mindset, too, because it allows us as parents to then be able to genuinely praise that when they do it. And that is a category one behavior. If you remember me talking about the three categories of behavior, category one are the things that our kids do that we like, that we want to see more of. So if you're going to give them the ability to contribute to the family, you could call that a chore, but I would encourage you to consider it an opportunity and let them have say in what it's going to be. But recognize that even young kids can help out from a young age. Kids 2, 3 years old love to spray the spray bottle so they can help you spraying. Obviously, you don't want to use a toxic cleaning solution, but if some like a dilute vinegar solution or something on the glass can help you clean the windows, clean the mirrors. Young kids can learn to sweep, run the vacuum. Older kids can have the manual dexterity to load and unload the dishwasher, to fold laundry. All of these things can be really helpful. And then they give you an opportunity to practice gratitude and express to your child thanks, which builds their confidence and their sense of competency. So kids really benefit from having those opportunities and expectations that they will follow through on it. But again, you want to provide the structure. This is my expectation for you without forcing it and just giving them the opportunity to earn your appreciation. Number two is social navigation. And there's a whole part in this book where she's talking about how difficult it is, but how important it is to stay out of kids' interpersonal conflicts with their peers. And she discusses as a middle school teacher all the times that she's experienced parents coming in. And I think now with social media and all these things too, it's even more tempting for us to raise the red flag and get the school involved when we feel like things are going wrong. But her recommendation is if it's not a life and death situation, just wait. Like if something happens and your kid comes to you because of a social problem, don't do anything on their behalf for at least 24 hours. Just listen to them, support them, encourage them to handle it on their own, and then see what happens. Because oftentimes she's seen parents get involved, and then that really can make a bigger problem out of something that otherwise would have been a normal. There's a certain amount of totally normal behavior, especially among kids in that pre-adolescent period, even in aggressive behavior, whether it's verbally aggressive or even mildly physically aggressive, that's within the normal range. And we can make it worse if we label the kid who engaged in that as a bully or a problem. I'm not saying that it's good, but we have to understand that, especially in pre adolescence, our kids' brains are being remodeled majorly. And so there's a big disconnect between the parts of their brain that know what's right and wrong and the parts of their brain that feel the emotions. And they're feeling more emotion and more intense emotions than they ever have before in their life. And although the part of their brain that helps them or will help them to regulate those emotions and not act inappropriately is developing too, the connections between those two parts of the brain are really not there. And so a good kid can mess up. And if you think about your own life, you might be able to think of a time that you said something mean or did something mean or something that really wasn't very much something that aligns with who you are or your identity when you were a preteen or a teenager. And so just keep that in mind. So sorry, guys. So basically, her bias is, and I agree, stay out of it as much as possible. Now, obviously, if your child's being threatened, if they're being beaten up, if their safety is of concern, then you need to step in. Same with if there's drug use going on or someone's abusing them, you need to step in. Again, it's like all of those boundaries, right? But within the line that you decide is what you will and will not intervene for. If you're not going to intervene, just let it ride. Just be there. Ask, what would Mr. Rogers do? How can you support your child to be able to navigate this themselves? And normalize the fact that disruptions in friendships, things not going the way you want, feeling left out, all of that is something that normally happens in adolescence and pre-adolescence for all of us. Sorry, I'm just going to put my phone on Do Not Disturb. Should have done that earlier. All right, sports lessons. So there's a whole section in the book about sports, which I found fascinating. Talking about, and I see you're here, Wendy, you've got athletic kids, but talking about how sports have really changed from when I was a kid and was not an athletic kid, but I still was allowed to play. I didn't start playing basketball till high school. I didn't start playing soccer till high school. Was I behind my peers? Yes, but not nearly as behind as a ninth grader would be today if they'd never kicked a soccer ball and they tried out for the team. Because a lot of kids now are starting their sports at age 3. And so if you even pick up a sport in like fifth or sixth grade, you're years behind kids who've been practicing in some kind of club before you. And that makes it feel like you have to be really good at a sport to even enjoy or be able to play, which is a shame because so much can come in terms of social development and personal development from the act of being on a team and playing a sport. So there was a whole section there. If you have kids who play sports, I would recommend reading that chapter. It was pretty eye opening for me. But what she suggests is that we should try as much as possible to get our kids to just enjoy the sport for the sake of it and not put a ton of pressure on them to be the best. If they're self driven to want to do those things, then great, support them 100%, but don't put the pressure on them. And they asked a bunch of kids, I think in high school sports, what was their favorite and least favorite part of their parents' involvement in their sports. And universally, the kids said the drive home from the games was the part they liked the least because parents tend to analyze the game, analyze everything the kid did, criticize, give them feedback, even if it's unsolicited feedback. And that just adds a lot of tension. And she discussed how grandparents don't have that experience. When they go to the kids' games, they just enjoy being there and they don't really care who won or lost. It's more about the process of enjoying seeing their child trying something and trying their best. And she basically says we should try to be more like grandparents and less like the coach at home. Because what our kids really need from us is not to put pressure on them, but just to enjoy their involvement and support their involvement. All right. Critical periods for growth. Middle school, this is where I am with my 12-year-old son. He's in sixth grade. You may have seen me say that I offered him $100 if he would get a C on his report card. And I did. And that offer still stands. He has not yet brought home a C on his report card. But the reason I did that is that he is very hard on himself. I've been from the beginning with him and with my daughter too, very hands off with school. I've let the teachers know I'm not going to be checking the Blackbaud system where they put the grades like ever. And this year I didn't even go to the parent teacher conferences. I'm bad, but I trust and I let the teachers know that I trust they're doing a great job and that they have my kids' best interest at heart. And if there's any concerns they have, they should just reach out to me. But that the assignments are between them and my child. And if my child isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing, that's between them and my child until they decide it's at the point that I need to intervene. So far, for my kids, that's worked well. And essentially, what I'm sending to my kids is the belief that they can do this. And when they're ready to be a kid who does their homework, then they'll do their homework. And I also really don't believe that much in homework for especially the elementary school ages. I don't think there's much value in it. So I've left it up to them if they want to be the kind of kid who does the homework because that's what the teacher has asked them to do or not. And they've both eventually chosen to be the kind of kid who does the homework, which is great. But for my son, I worry because he's very self-critical, he's perfectionistic, he takes it very hard if he, works hard and doesn't get a great grade. I'm challenging him to get a C because I want him to understand in his body what I tell him all the time, and that is your grades don't determine your worth. And I've told him many examples. I went to medical school, so did my husband. That's obviously a long road. It's arduous, it's competitive. And I had a good friend who, at the end of the second year of medical school, which is right before you take one of the steps, the USMLE steps before you're eligible to be minted as a doctor and enter residency, her father died of cancer. So understandably, she was emotionally distressed. And she had been an excellent student despite all the distress of him being sick in those first 2 years. She kept coming to class. She did okay on her exams. But on the actual test day, I think everything was overwhelming. She bombed her step one. And that really ruined her chances for getting into a good residency program. So I tell him that story. I tell the story of my friend James, who we went to college together. We've known each other since high school. He's a very bright guy, but he doesn't test super great. So after college, he applied to dental school, didn't get in. So he got a master's degree in biomedical engineering. He applied again. He didn't get in. He applied a third time and he finally got in. So again, understanding that the path to success doesn't have to be linear. And for most people, it's not. I don't know where the bumps are going to be in my kid's road, but I'm pretty sure there will be some. And I want him to know and to have experience that I can get a grade that doesn't reflect what I'm capable of or my best work or my optimal performance and still be me and still be valuable. So that's why I've offered him $100 for a C. And it's why I hope that he will take me up on it at some point in time. But basically, you want to send the message that you believe in them and that you can connect them to help if they want it. You want to be the parent as consultant, as we heard in the last book from Ned Johnson and Bill Stixrud. You don't want to be the parent who's micromanaging and sitting them down and telling them, now you'll do math and now you'll do this. You want to step back and just say, I trust that you'll figure this out. It might take you a year, it might take you 4, but before you turn 18, I trust that you're going to figure out how to manage your assignments and get things in on time. And if you're struggling and you want to get someone else's guidance, it probably shouldn't be you as a parent. That doesn't usually work well, but let them know you'll do your best to help them find someone who could help. In high school, we really, if we haven't stepped back by then, we really do need to. And this is where it's the hardest, I think, for parents, because if you're the type of parent who's anxious about your kids' future success, and so it's been hard for you up until this point to let them fail on their own and learn the hard way, it's going to be even harder in high school when you know that transcript matters to wherever they apply for college, right? But it's really important that we do step back at this point in time. And this was really hard for me as a child psychiatrist when I would work with families where the kids were struggling. But the author here in this book, Jessica Leahy, she gives several examples of kids who were struggling, whose parents decided, you know what? I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to trust that you'll figure this out. I'm not going to nag you about grades. I'm not going to nag you about homework. And it would take a semester or two, but eventually that gave the child room to own that they could do a good job and to do it themselves for themselves, that intrinsic motivation rather than the extrinsic motivation. So, really, that's the key. We want to set our kids up to have an internally derived sense of value and to feel the positive rewards that no one can give you when you know you've done something that was difficult and that you did it all yourself. And that's something that we can't give them without allowing them to struggle and encouraging them to struggle because we know that it's worth it. Then she talks about how we as parents can support our kids in academic environments. And as a teacher, I think she's very much the right person to give us this guidance. My sister is actually a middle school guidance counselor. She works at the same middle school that she and I both attended. And I think she is just like a saint for doing the work that she does. But teachers do often experience the ire of parents when a child's not getting a grade that they feel reflects what they should be getting. And I do agree with her. There has been a shift generally. She says it used to be, and this is true for like my parents' generation. My mom would tell a story. She went to a Catholic elementary school. She would come home and tell her mom crying that the nun had hit her on the knuckles for doing something wrong. And instead of getting mad at the teacher, her mother would then hit her for having done something wrong. So it used to be that parents had teachers' backs and authority figures were aligned against children. I don't think that was the best way to be. But now the pendulum has shifted the other way, where I think often we don't respect teachers like we should as authority figures. We don't believe that their interests are aligned with ours, but we should remember that teachers are salt of the earth people who care about kids and who've dedicated their lives to them and who want our kids' success just as much as we do and just as much as our children do. So we want to assume positive intent. And if things aren't going the way we like, she encourages us to be in direct contact with teachers. If you're going to step back and not be on Blackbaud, she also acknowledges that this trend, which is nationwide with the core curriculum standards and everything being now online, this trend that everything's online and that teachers are expected to post grades and communicate with families and kids that way has put parents in an unfortunate situation of being responsible for the kid completing these assignments. And she really encourages us to step out of that. And she herself does what I do, and she doesn't go online. She doesn't do those things, but she does communicate with her kids' teachers to let them know, I'm never going to be in there. I'm never going to see the grade. So please don't let it be a total surprise if my kid is like failing or not showing up to class. Like, I do want to know something's going south, but just know that's between you and him or you and her first, and then involve me if you need to. And then gives the teacher the way to reach her. And then for homework, she encourages, again, provide the framework, provide the expectations and the boundaries, but then let your child choose or not choose to make use of that. Give them a distraction free environment, encourage time management, make sure that they've had a snack and some water before they sit down to do homework, and act as a consultant. Don't expect that your child can decide to do their homework at 10 p.m. and come knocking on your door to wake you up to ask for your help. You can set the framework of, I'm available to help you up until 7 p.m. or from 6 to 7 p.m. nightly. Other than that, you're on your own. And that's fine. And your child will have to learn that if they need help, that's when they need to be doing their homework. And then when it comes to grades, there's a whole part of this book about basically how grades are terrible, right? Because grades are ultimately there. Let's see. There's a lot of quotes about the grade. Let me see if I can find my quotes. Second. Yeah. Basically, she says grades, understanding what I've told you, that like extrinsic rewards, if you reward someone with an A for a job that they enjoyed doing, they're less likely to even want to do it again in the future. That's the problem with grades, because that's absolutely how we're wired. But some kids really are wired for the gold stars and they're motivated to get that reward. The problem is that then when they miss out on it, like my friend in medical school, when she then didn't do as well as she had hoped, it's devastating. And it causes a real crack in your self identity because you've felt and believed and allowed yourself to believe falsely that like the gold star, the A means that you have worth. And then when you miss out on that because of something that's likely largely outside your control, you now don't have worth. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. So, far more important than grades is the narrative description of how your child is doing, which many schools don't really have anymore. I know in my public school experience, it was all just a report card with letter grades, and then they used to grade effort. I don't know if they still do that, but that's again subjective. But she also admits that there's no getting around this. Like grades are going to be around forever. We're always going to be ranking people in some ways. It's part of how things have to be. So I think the message that we want to send our kids is do your best, but also be compassionate with yourself and understand that your grades don't determine your worth. And I think, yeah, that's it. So, any questions or thoughts about this book or the subject or my decision to offer my kid $100 for a C?
It's hard and you are brave.
All right. I'll let you know how it goes. I think one question I imagine would come up would be, that's great. If you have a perfectionist straight A student kid, sounds good and easy to challenge them and say, okay, sure, I'll pay you for a seat. I think it's for this situation, I was thinking about it this morning, it's when if he takes me up on it and he messes up, I mean, I think really he'd have to try to mess up that much to bring his grade down to a C because he's so driven and on top of things. But if he did throw things just to prove to himself that a C doesn't change his value and who he is, that's a win because that's a huge lesson for him, right? And if he doesn't, if he chooses to keep doing his best and he never brings home a C, at least not at this point in his career, his academic career, then that tells me the intrinsic reward for him of knowing that he did his best is more valuable than $100, which I think is also a parenting win. So I'm choosing to view that as like win, regardless of what he chooses. Now, if my child were a kid who really didn't care about school, or I shouldn't say didn't care about school. All kids care about school. It's a mistake to assume if your child is struggling that they're lazy or that they don't care. I think all kids do care. Some kids from a pretty early age can internalize a sense of learned helplessness that makes them say, I don't care, or act like they don't care. But the reality is, if they've been giving their best effort and never getting any recognition for that, and always been being criticized for it because they're falling short of teachers' expectations because maybe they have a learning difference or ADHD or something else, then it's a coping mechanism to start saying, I don't care. So if you, as a parent of a child like that, can send the message that you know they're great, they have lots of strengths. You also know that school can be challenging. And you just are not going to nag them anymore. You trust that they're going to figure it out and that you're going to be there for them and let me know if you need any help or if there's someone you'd like to talk to. There are people who can help kids like you. If you just say that to them and then step back, you're going to give them the opportunity to turn things around. And there's multiple examples of that from the books that we read from Bill Stixrud and Ned Johnson, and in this book by Jessica Lahey too, of where kids really do turn that around. And there's many examples of very successful people who were not good students. So I think the other challenge is that as parents, we tell ourselves the story that my kid has to get great grades and get into a great high school and college and or university in order to be successful in life. And that is simply not true. What they have to be is someone who believes in themselves. What they have to be is someone who perseveres. What they have to be is someone who brings value to others and thinks big. That's far more important than having the great grades. And so, if your child is struggling, if you can send that message to them that you're confident that they're a good person, that they're hardworking, that they're going to figure this out, that the grades aren't everything. And if you can find for them stories, Google is your friend here. Like, Google famous failures, Google people who were huge business successes who had learning disabilities or poor grades, and you'll find many examples that you can share with your child. So that becomes a real life internalized sense for them that they don't have to be a straight A student in order to succeed in life. All right. If there's no other questions or comments, I'm going to wrap it up for today. But thank you all for joining. And hopefully, I'll see you next month. Our next book is called How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk. It is absolutely a classic. The authors are Adele Faber and Eileen Maslish. And this book was written a while ago, like I want to say in the 80s. And their daughters have actually written a sequel called How to Talk So Little Kids Will Listen. And that one is also really great. But this one is a really good one for the 5 and up parent crowd or parents of kids age 5 and up. So hopefully you can join me for that. See ya. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.